are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
I am perceiving the creation with renewed conviction, deliberating over whether I'd been taught a misnomer of lies, the likes of which had me formerly entrenched in belief that we, as humanity, inhabit a spherical earth comparable to every globe sitting atop a teacher's desk. As inheritors of the grand matrix, we are indoctrinated into a preponderance of lies, speculative assumptions, carefully crafted as web of deceit. Awakening makes one question everything thought relevant, all that one had once so innocently accepted in assurance as evidentiary truth. Similar to the day after awakening to the conspiracy of 9/11 and government-sponsored terror, all must be reassessed upon this certainty that things are not as they appear to be. Have we all been held hostage to some secret societal Freemasonic accord, a deception so colossal, so pervasive, only those in the know understand our collective world situation? Do the globalist elite celebrate the achievement of earthly domination by hoisting flag in front and above the United Nations, depicting the flat earth as it really is, holding all nations in singular, circular embrace? Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed, and I thank all of you that have taken the time to join me this evening. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be deliberating and talking about and delving into all things esoteric, especially in connection to the flat earth as topic. There's so much interest in it. And a lot of people say that, what does it matter? Why should people make it any kind of give it any kind of priority for their lives, and why should they delve into it as topic? I mean, what does it matter? For Christians, a lot of people question whether it has any bearing on salvation, and is it really going to make a difference on a Christian's life? And then for those that are agnostic, or that are just now coming to deliberate on whether there's any relevance to giving any kind of time to investigating this topic at all. Why? What does it matter? And in my opinion, whether the earth is flat or whether it's a sphere has grand significance in all of our lives, because the Darwinian heliocentric worldview has for hundreds of years led so many people astray, to the point where so many have accepted without any second thought that humanity has evolved of ape, and that there's some missing link, some ancestor out there which unites monkey and man. And that, especially for all these scientists, these PhD degree scientists that consider their professional opinions of more weight and bearing than that of the rest of humanity, and that have accepted all of the scientific belief systems which cater to the Darwinian and the heliocentric model as far as world and these accepted theorems. They have no belief in God, and they have been led astray to such degree that they have no real deep and profound spirituality to their lives other than science as their religion. They don't believe in intelligent design. They don't believe in a creator other than, the protons, neutrons, and electrons that somehow just randomly came together to create us, and also that made the earth what it is, just because they believe that it's just another one of those planets that just happens to orbit around the sun and happens to be at the right distance to be in the Goldilocks zone, and that this is the reason why life evolved here on this particular planet. And so they also believe that there are millions, billions even, other Earths out there which have all in similarity evolved life, and that there are other Earthlings, other people in that also evolved of monkeys or evolved of other creatures that have sentience and that have consciousness and that are far in advance even of our own capacities, our own abilities, that are possibly millions and billions of light years in advancement of our own technologies. And they believe that many of these beings have traveled great distance to arrive here to this planet, and that they, in fact, somehow long ago, these ancient aliens or astronauts, humanity from the future even, that they seeded humanity here on this planet. And so that whole belief system, all of those lies built upon other lies, these preponderance of lies and this web of deceit, has the whole world now ripe and ready to bow down to these Anunnaki gods, just as being pushed and seeded into the consciousness, into the minds of humanity now worldwide. Everybody is so willing to believe that the ancient aliens created us, and that the whole reason we are not able to find this so-called missing link is because it wasn't some ape ancestor out there that bridged that gap from gorilla or chimpanzee or whatever monkey it is that we supposedly evolved from. It was the ancient aliens. It was these alien beings that came from however far away and whichever planetary body which is similar to ours, that were far eons and epochs of time preceding ours, that these are the beings, these entities arrived here long ago, and that either they mated directly in some kind of bestial experiment or engaging directly in uh, some kind of unholy fornication, that the result, or whether it was some DNA genetic experiment, that that involvement, that manipulation is what led to and brought about who we are and who we have come to be. And the Bible establishes and warns about this strong delusion and references who these so-called ancient aliens are as the fallen watchers and also the rebel angels that were cast out of the heavens long ago. It's not that they came from some far away place and ended up being here after, traveling or utilizing wormhole and technologies to access this particular plane and this particular planet, even though we know it's not a planet. But they believe that it's just one of, even 9 here in this solar system. And so the truth of the word, the gospel, it brings clarity to the lies that have been built upon the lies that so many of the world have accepted as truth. And having accepted as truth, have now found themselves so lost and so led astray that everybody is willing and ready to bow before the Antichrist, and that these ancient aliens are going to be established as the creators of all of us. And so that's why it's, in my opinion, very important to study the flat earth as revelation and come to know the things that are in connection to it, because when you can grasp it and make sense of it and understand that the whole heliocentric worldview cannot in any way be verified scientifically or through theory, that it is all a grand deception. And that when you really begin to look into the flat earth and come to understanding about how even biblically and prophetically and through the gospel, that the truth has been established and written down thousands of years in advance to this grand deception, then you have to really come to terms with there being a creator and that we were made in the image of the creator, and that the earth is a special place, and that we as humanity share special covenant with this entity, the grand arbiter that created all of us in his image. And when you ponder these things and are forced to acknowledge and reckon this as evidentiary truth, well, it completely destroys the scientific established so-called truth that the world has bought into for hundreds of years. And so tonight we're going to talk about another one of those books that thousands of years in advance locked the flat earth as revelation into its scriptural text, the book of Enoch. And I'm going to share with you this evening how it was that once I began to study the flat earth, and then once I opened myself to its grand possibility, how having read and studied the book of Enoch when I was 18 years old, there was a portion of the text called the Book on the Courses of the Heavenly Luminaries, which I never could make sense of. And studying it, looking into it, I was never able to understand it in the way that I felt like it was meant to be understood. And so I'm going to share and talk about that, because my ninth book, in last week's show, I talked about the books that I have published and my journey to where I am now, how I've come to understand the prophetic word as well as the conspiratorial, the esoteric side of world and what's going on in current events. But my ninth book in specific, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, is what brought me to understanding on the truth in regards to the model of world. And when we come back from the first break, I will elaborate in more detail with that. And also, for those that are in the chat room, my representative there is Kathy Dunson. And so if you have any questions and would like me to specifically answer anything in relation to the topics that I'm speaking on, even if it's not, on these particular issues, you're welcome to ask me anything, and I will try to answer in the best way that I can. And so she will relay your questions to me, and I will address them in the best way that I can. And I will also share during this particular show, if we have time, because I definitely want to establish the foundation of the premise of this book and present it to you in a way that I can help you to be able to, in your own way, to also decrypt the book of Enoch, and specifically chapters 70 through 84, which are those chapters which are connected to the book on the courses of the Heavenly Luminaries. And it's also another thing that I did not understand prior, which I do now, is why it was that Enoch wrote and directly spoke about the motions of the sun and the moon in these particular chapters, and how it is he dedicates not even one chapter or not even one passage or scripture within the text to the motions of the earth. And, thinking about it now and then, having revisited the text in new light and with understanding that the earth is a flat circular plane and that it's the sun and the moon which move above it, as is cited in other biblical passages like the tabernacle of the sun in Psalms 19, I believe. It talks about the movement of the sun and the moon above the circular face of the earth. And in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22, it elaborates and describes the model of the earth as in being in the shape of a tent or a tabernacle, and that the earth as a flat circular disc, that the heavens, the firmament, the heavens were spread above it as a curtain, which when you think about these things and you consider these things, it also makes sense with the Genesis chapter 1, the order of creation, and how the earth was established prior to the sun and the moon being created on day 4. And when you think about the order of creation and apply it to the heliocentric worldview and then that of the flat earth, and it only makes sense that the earth is much larger and was established as foundation. Again, as Isaiah said, for the heavens which were spread out and as a curtain above the earth, and that the firmament is fitted to the foundation of the earth. And so even though the earth became null and void, and there's great speculation as to how and why that occurred, regardless, the earth was already in place before the sun and the moon were created to shed light for both the day and the night above and upon the earth. And how would it make sense in a heliocentric model for the earth to have been created and then just floating out there in nothingness, and then after the sun was established on the 4th day, then somehow the earth was then put in orbit around it? Those kind of things do not make sense. And for those that, again, believe that study of the flat earth is irrelevant, unless you do this research and really give of your time and your effort to investigating in a deeply profound manner, so much of the scriptures just do not make sense. Because in several places, in many places, the word, the gospel, alludes to the earth as being immovable and having been set in firm foundation for the heavens, and that it is unmoving. And so that in itself also contradicts the whole premise of the earth orbiting the sun. And also, when you realize that the earth was established as foundation, it is of much larger and grander proportion than that of the sun or the moon. And the book of Enoch also references both the sun and moon as being in similar dimension and size. And so we'll talk about these things. And then I'll also specifically want to make sure that I help you to understand what Enoch is describing with the motions of the sun, where he talks about its movement through the six gates of heaven. And so when we return, we'll elaborate and detail that in greater capacity. Be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'll open this segment with a quote from chapter 74 of the book of Enoch, and this will help us to set foundation for what I'm going to be covering in the rest of the show. And then after I read this quote, I'm going to share just a couple of stories from the canon, the King James version of the canon, and then we'll go into describing the movements and the motions of the sun as detailed by Enoch. Chapter 74, verse 8, it says this: of heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth, become conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven. And so let me just tell you really quickly that my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, it covers all the chapters, all 14 chapters, which are part of the book on the courses of the Heavenly Luminaries found in the book of Enoch. And it's in these 14 chapters that not only does it describe the motions of the sun and the moon, but also speaks about the two calendars, the lunar and the solar calendar, and also details the movement of the constellations, around Polaris, and how these different, the heavenly luminaries, they are much like a giant timepiece for keeping track of days, weeks, months, and years, so that humanity can, keep track of the passing history. And so, as I said in the previous segment, Enoch details in very elaborate and specific detail the motions of both the sun and the moon, but never speaks about the movement of the earth. Again, because the reason being is because the earth does not move. Okay. Question, and I will get to that here. There's a question on comments and asteroids, and I will get to that question because somebody else asked me also to detail what I think about the prior times. Because for those of you that are aware of my work, you know that in my sixth book, Sons of God, I published a timeline for creation, and I talk about in that particular book, I discuss the story of the Enuma Elish, and also in the Lost Book of Enki, Zechariah Sitchin talks about the how Nibiru had come in conflict with Tiamat, and how Tiamat was a name for the old earth, and how one of these satellites referenced as the west wind, how this satellite, one of the moons of Nibiru, had smashed into the earth and destroyed it and split it asunder. And so, well, I guess I can go ahead and cover that because it's my belief now that everything that we've been taught as far as the solar system, the proportions of the planets with the sun being the largest body of this solar system, and that it holds the mass of 98.6% of the solar system, and that 109 Earths can be lined up side by side across the breadth of its diameter. And so all of this has to be reassessed. You know, once you come to understanding that the earth is much larger in proportion than either the sun or these other planetary bodies, what the book of Enoch references as these wandering stars, then everything has to be reassessed. And so let me, I'll go to the question that somebody had asked me, and then I'll go back to what I was going to talk about. But I think this is an important enough question that I should go ahead and address it. And I'll read to you my answer and the question that this person asked me specifically about this same thing. All right. The question from Danina, I believe, was the person that asked me. She said, "Hey Zen, I was listening to one of your shows on Blog Talk Radio entitled Great Mystery from Light to Darkness, and you reference your Skyfall book, because I cover it in Skyfall as well, but also in Sons of God, my sixth book, The Timeline of Creation. I reference this war between the, Nibiru, because in the Enuma Elish, it talks about this conflict that occurs between Tiamat and Nibiru, and they call it the planet of the crossing, Nibiru, Planet X. And so I talk about that in these two books. But just to finish the question about the planet Nibiru and Tiamat and Mars once having a watery surface, etc., I was wondering how your recent revelation about flat Earth might be changing your perception of these creation stories and texts about the prior times now. And so let me read my answer, and then I'll detail it. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, the story of the Enuma Elish it's the ancient Babylonian Akkadian creation story, which describes Nibiru being captured as a planet and made part of the solar system. And because it has an orbit which is opposite the normal, the counterclockwise motion of the supposed other planets of the solar system, and Nibiru it is supposedly orbiting clockwise and crosses the ecliptic where the asteroid belt is, and that when it was initially captured, that it was driven towards the planet that used to be where the asteroid belt now is, and that that it's one of its moons had destroyed this particular planet called Tiamat, and that Tiamat used to be, or supposedly according to the teachings of the Sumerians, that it used to be the old earth, and that after it was destroyed, they called the new earth Ki. Anyways, and so all of this is detailed in these early creation stories. And so let me read the answer now. It says this. I wrote this. That's a really good question, and one that has been asked of me previously, especially since recently coming out on the issue of the flat earth as revelation for Model a World. I did answer this on some other show, and will do so again this coming Saturday, which is now, when I talk about how the flat earth relates to the book of Enoch. But just to elaborate a little bit in response to your query, not only do I cover this in the timeline of creation found in my 6th book, Sons of God, I also cover this topic somewhat in my 7th book, Skyfall. Of course, my understanding of what happened with Tiamat and Nibiru has changed somewhat with my understanding of the flat earth, since I no longer believe that the other wandering stars or planets, which we reference as planets, orbit around the sun in the way that I had understood prior, or that they are in any way larger or even comparable to size with that of the earth. Nor do I believe that the sun is in any way as large as the earth in my current understanding of the dynamics of world. However, that being said, in having modified my views somewhat in regard to my understanding and interpretation of the events which brought Tiamat into confrontation with Nibiru, and which resulted in its destruction and also led to the creation of the asteroid belt, the biggest question for me now has to do with what is Tiamat? And if it is not associated with the earth, then what is it? I've also had to reconsider whether the asteroid belt even exists at all, and if planets are not in any way what we thought they were. How does that play into the creation stories of all of these ancient civilizations? And are they in any way trustworthy, since they are based upon the mythology and teachings of the fallen angels? And so there's a lot to ponder and a lot to consider. I am more inclined to believe that the ancient mythologies, when dependent on the testimony of the rebel angels, the fallen watchers, or the Anunnaki, cannot in any way be trusted, and that any belief in them is questionable at best. And whereas I had believed prior that there was some veracity to these Sumerian teachings and mythologies, except where they contradict the biblical narrative, I am no longer inclined to believe in such manner, and do not feel that they deserve the benefit of the doubt. And like NASA, the rebel angels, fallen watchers, and the Anunnaki have proven themselves to be liars, and like other liars should not be trusted in any manner with anything they say. And so now, like NASA, I do not give the Sumerian mythology in any benefit of the doubt in any way. And so I have had to totally and entirely shift my current viewpoint. I still feel that when it comes to the earth, that there was a time when there was a vaporous canopy which enveloped the firmament and prevented the stars or the sun from being seen or shining through, and that there was a time when there was not yet rain or a man to till the ground, as it says in Genesis, for those that are familiar with scripture. And that perhaps this cloud layer was impacted in some way by the passing of the destroyer, which, those of you that are familiar with the Colburn Bible, that the destroyer is the name of this planet Nibiru, or Planet X, which resulted in the modification of the atmosphere and disruption or collapse of this vaporous canopy. Because even the Bible mentions this variation in the climate of the earth. I also still feel like there is something to the destruction of the first world age, and that the rebel angels indeed did rule during the prior times before the modern creation of humanity. I am doubtful now as to whether there is any merit to the ancient stories in association to Tiamat, and whether it has any association with that of the earth. Of course, there is no way that the earth was completely destroyed by one of the moons of Nibiru, or that the orbit of the earth had shifted with that of Mars, since the earth does not in any way orbit around the sun, as I had once believed. Of course, those of us that have come to revelation of the earth being flat are all having to reassess what we had traditionally been raised to believe, especially with regards to how and what we consider planets to be, and what the solar system is. Of course, I am still in the process of ascertaining and reevaluation what I think of these and other variables with regard to what and how I think about these kinds of things. And because I am still reassessing such perspective, I am really unable to give you an elaborate answer other than stating that my understanding on this and other scenarios in connection to these and other events are shifting according to what I am learning and now know. God bless. Once I can answer in even greater and with more detail, I will certainly do so. And so I hope that addresses asteroids and comets. The fact that there are asteroids and that there are comets makes me think that indeed there had to have been some kind of cataclysm that occurred previously, which created these particular interlopers, these objects. What that is, I can only speculate. The ancient stories reference that it was the earth which was destroyed long ago. But as I said in this response, even if it was Nibiru as a planet, because all of these planets, these planets, they are absolutely much smaller, and especially if they orbit the sun, as is postulated by Tycho Brahe in his, his geocentric, the Earth being the center of the solar system, and the sun, and even some of these planets orbiting around the sun, but that the sun orbits around the Earth, around the polar north. And so if these planets do indeed orbit around the sun is a very small body, and it in no way has a larger proportion than that of the Earth. And so even if they are orbiting around the sun, even if they crashed into the Earth, they would not affect the Earth in a way that would destroy it completely. And so there's got to be something different to that story as it has been portrayed in the Sumerian mythology, which again, the Sumerian texts also speak about the rebel angels, Enki and Enlil, how they, in the story, especially in the Lost Book of Enki, how they had traveled to the moon and how they had established these way stations on Mars as a way to mine the gold here on the Earth and transport it to their planet. And so all of these things, have to be reconsidered in light that the Earth is absolutely much larger than that of the planets or even the sun. And if the sun and the moon are only, say, 32 miles in diameter and only 3,000 miles above the Earth, how can the moon, how can it had been established as a way station? And how can there be ancient aliens up there? It just does not make sense anymore in the way that we had traditionally believed the solar systems and the proportions and all of that to have been prior. And so the Book of Enoch, in my opinion, people should study and look into it in greater detail, because these are things which it has cited for thousands of years, which we would consider to be absolute lunacy. But now, in light of understanding the flat Earth and the proportions of the sun and the moon and the other planets as wandering stars, how all of that, it is forcing us all to reassess what the Book of Enoch asserts, as well as what the Bible asserts, because, there's that whole story of Joshua in chapter 10, where he's given the authority by the Most High to stop the sun and the moon in their circuits. And when you consider that in the heliocentric worldview, that does not make in any way any kind of sense, because according to, if it's the Earth which is orbiting around the sun and spinning on its axis once every 24 hours, that causes the sun to go down, then Joshua should have been given the authority to stop the Earth and the moon, and not the sun and the moon. And so when we return from this upcoming break, I'll detail this story and one other, and then I will go into explaining the motions of the sun as described by Enoch, and how it is that you can only make sense of the vision that he was given and shown by the angel Uriel when you apply these motions to the same vision that Isaiah was given of the circle of the earth and the heavens, the firmament spread as curtain above the circle of the earth as a flat circular disc. And that the earth as foundation and the heavens as the firmament spread above, that they take on the shape of a tent or a tabernacle or an enclosed dome, a dome-like, an enclosed dome-like world, which I know Mark and Rob Skiba and others have been elaborating in great detail in the shows that they have done. And so we'll cover that. And also I'll share a Bible code that I found, which also details the shape of the world in such manner. And I will actually send the link to that Bible code to Kathy so she can share it with you in the chat room over this upcoming break. But all of this is, once you understand it helps us to understand things in a way that we never had prior. And as I said in the very opening of the show, it completely destroys the assertions of the astrophysicists of the world, Neil, I can't even remember his name now, and NASA, all of the astrophysicists, all of their assertions that the world is, heliocentric, all of that is destroyed. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. And I did post to Kathy 2 of the Bible codes which I discovered when I started to investigate and look into this information, because that is also one of the things that I do whenever I come across a very controversial topic, and which I want to confirm whether it's biblical and whether it has been encoded, because it's my opinion that if you can find a Bible code on something of a very controversial nature, and that it could only have been encoded into the text in such manner by divine inspiration, and that there's no other way, especially if you find a very elaborate matrix, such as I had found when I discovered this particular Bible code. And of course, I began with flat earth. And when I discovered that it was indeed encoded into the text, then I began to expand upon the matrix, and I kept adding more and more words, and discovered in the process of expanding this matrix that it absolutely fell in line with the vision that Isaiah references in chapter 40, talking about the circle of the earth and how the heavens were spread as a curtain above it, and that the foundation of the earth and with the heavens spread out above it are in the shape of a tent or a tabernacle. And so those were the kind of keywords I selected for investigation and research to see that if I could find this vision of both Isaiah and Enoch encoded into the biblical text um, in such manner. And absolutely I did. And so I sent 2 matrices that you can go, and if you want to ever, you can go to BibleCodeWisdom.com and you can search for Bible codes yourself. And you can verify indeed that I was able to discover this matrix and the keywords that I discovered in connection to this matrix. This, I have this as chapter 10 in my book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, which also I'll send the link. I think Kathy probably already has the link to where you can find the book, but if not, I'll send it to her. And so those of you that might be interested in it, you can, research it for yourself, because as I said, it's 400 pages and just deeply, there's such profound, insight, very profound revelations contained within the body of that book. And so let me just detail, because I know we'll quickly run out of time, and I want to be able to cover the motions of the sun. And so let me just cover these 2 Bible codes really quick and detail the keywords associated to them. In the first matrix, as I said, I began with the word flat earth and then trying to select keywords which would apply to Isaiah's vision of the circle of the earth with the canopy, with the heavens spread as a curtain above it. I chose these other keywords and found all of them contained within the same matrix. Flat earth, canopy, tent, truth, ring, edge, even, and dome. All of these words together are found in the same matrix. And I was able to also find even more terms which are applicable to this particular vision. But because BibleCodeWisdom.com only allows you a certain number of characters and a certain a certain amount of words that you can search for, I had to begin a whole separate matrix. And that one, I also began with flat earth. But the keywords that I found in connection to that matrix, and this one's not even completed yet. I'll have to at some point, search out more terms, but the terms that I already have located with this particular matrix are flat earth, fixed, disc, ring, edge, and ends, which all of this, connects to the ends of the earth, because it speaks about that also in the Bible, in those texts. The Antarctic ring or the edge, the Antarctic as the edge of the earth, and it being a fixed disc. All of these things you can find in these matrices. And when you pull them up, you'll see how they are located within the matrix, and how the equal letter, the ELS, the equidistance letter sequencing, how it plays out in the text for you to find these matrices. And any of you that may want to, or if you want to elaborate on those matrices and search out other terms, let me know what you discover, and if you are able to improve upon the matrices that I had already began. All right. Another question. Alan asked a question about the authenticity of the Bible, and I'll be glad to address that. The Bible is prophetic, 100% prophetic, and it has detailed prophecy thousands of years in advance, as in the case of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, where he saw the statue made of gold, silver, iron, and clay mixed with miry iron. That particular vision extended and detailed 4 kingdoms that would come into power. Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then how the Confederation of Rome would break up, but that there would still be this 4th kingdom, which would be comprised of the destroyed Roman Empire. And we know that after Alexander the Great died, his generals split up his kingdom. And so this particular vision of this particular statue, as it alludes to the rise and fall of these kingdoms, is, as I said, extends over thousands of years. And every prophecy, like there's several hundreds, which are also in connection to the coming of Yeshua, and how he would be born into the flesh to a virgin, how he would be born in Bethlehem, and how he would be of the line of Judah. All of these prophecies have also been verified. And Yeshua, his coming, his life and death and crucifixion, all of that was also prophesied. And it's not just that, but again, that the line of Cain would rule with the New World Order and the families of the world that sit on the thrones of the world today, that this enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent would play out and would be ongoing even in this day and age. The prophecy of the blooming of the fig tree, which relates to the recreation of the nation of Israel in 1948, and how the generation that saw that would be the last generation, the final generation, and that all things would be fulfilled during the lifetime of those that were alive during this, when this event occurred, that we are that generation, and that we are going to see the fulfillment of all prophecy. And Matthew chapter 24, Mark chapter 13, and Luke chapter 21, that details the apostles asked Christ what would be the signs of his coming, his second coming, and that it would be with his return that the wheat and the tares would be gathered for burning, and that the wheat would be preserved for entrance into the millennial reign, and allowed it to enter into the New Jerusalem. all of these prophecies, and there are thousands. These are just some that I am, that I am bringing forth. But there are thousands of prophecies which have been prophetically fulfilled. And there is no book out there that is not inspired by the Creator that created the flat earth, that made us in his image, and established our, life and being here on this earth and under this firmament, that it's the same Creator that established the earth and created us in his image that also wrote the Bible and inspired the prophets to bring forth the Bible in the way that we have it. Because the Bible also details that the earth is flat, and that, it details all of these prophecies thousands of years in advance. And there's no other book in the world like it that is 100% accurate. And not only that, but in referencing the Bible codes, there's no other book out there that has these kinds of equal distance letter sequencing encoded over the Bible and the chapters and the scriptures of the Bible, which also detail events and things that have happened and that are still happening thousands of years into the future. And it's only with the creation of the computer and the creation of software that allows for such searching that we even are able to utilize and to discover these codes in our lifetime, in our generation. It's my opinion that all these things are coming to light now because we are the final generation, and that with the blooming of the fig tree, we will see all things revealed. And so, just like with the book of Enoch, with the flat earth as being encoded into the book of Enoch, and that with the acceptance of the heliocentric worldview, all of the information related in the book of Enoch, as far as the book on the courses of the Heavenly Luminaries, all of that knowledge was lost for at least the last 500 years. And it's only been with the publication of my latest book that people can now understand the book of Enoch in a way that lets you know the flat earth is very much real, and that it is the way that the model of the earth is, and that unless you accept such understanding and accept the earth as being a flat circular disc, one cannot make sense of what Enoch describes in that particular text. And as I stated earlier, you cannot make sense of the motions of the sun and the moon as described within the content of the book of Enoch unless you embrace the possibility and absolute knowledge that the earth is flat, motionless, and immovable. And science has verified this. There was and I'll post this I'll get Kathy to post this into the chat room. These scientific experiments that were done, which were done initially in order to verify that the earth was moving, and they did these experiments in order to try to determine the rate and the speed of the Earth's orbit around the sun. And what they discovered was that the Earth was not moving. And so Kathy will share the website, but this particular web page, the title for the web page is Notable Heliocentrist Experiments That Failed to Detect Any Movement of the Earth Around the Sun. And these scientific experiments absolutely verify that the Earth is not moving. And if the Earth is not moving, then there's no way that the Earth as a planet is orbiting around the sun. Which again is the reason why Enoch does not in any way describe the motions of the Earth in orbit around the sun, but describes the movements of the sun and the moon above the circle, the flat circle of the Earth. Which again is reason why in Genesis the Earth is described as being created first as foundation for the firmament which was fitted to it, and it was the firmament which the sun and the moon were placed into. Not above, but into. And so these experiments, the Michelson-Morley experiment, Airy's failure, you can pull it up yourself. The Sagnat experiment, these experiments absolutely verify, as it states in the Bible, in several places, that the Earth is unmoving, immovable, that it was established as foundation for the heavens and for the firmament which was fitted to it, and which the sun and the moon were placed within. And so, these scientific experiments were done in order to verify the orbit of the Earth and the rate of the movement of the Earth, but the Earth isn't unmoving, as we stated. And so the whole premise that the Earth is moving at 1,037.6666667 miles per hour. Another really interesting and weird thing about the heliocentric worldview is that when you begin to look into it, you have all of these 666 numbers come up. I'll give you an example. And then after this, with the next segment, I promise to elaborate on the motion of the sun as described in the book of Enoch. But consider this. It is asserted that the circumference of the earth is 24,901 miles, or 40,070 kilometers. And when you divide this circumference by the number of hours in a day, and you convert this orbital speed around the sun, you get a rate of 18.5 miles a second. And when you multiply that 18.5 miles a second by 60 for the 60 minutes of every hour, and then multiply that by the hours in a day, you get the miles per hour is 66,600 miles per hour is what science claims that the earth is orbiting the sun at this incredible speed. And that, as I said, when you divide the 24,901 miles by this 24 hours, you get a rate of 1,037.541,666,666.67 miles per hour, which converts to 66,600 miles per hour at the equator, the supposed orbital speed of the Earth. And so you have all these 666 numbers built into the heliocentric model for the rate of the Earth. And if you think these are, just happen to be coincidental, consider this. The Earth, when you subtract the supposed inclination of the Earth from the 90 degrees of it being straight up and down vertical, you have 90 degrees minus 23.4 degrees, and it equals 66.6 degrees. And so you think all of that is a coincidence? Absolutely not. All right. There's several passages. First Chronicles 16:30, Psalms 93:1, Psalms 96:1, 96:10. All of these passages assert that the earth does not move, and that it's the sun and the moon which move above the earth, which, as I stated earlier, is the reason why in Joshua chapter 10, Joshua is given the power by the Most High to stop the sun and the moon in their circuits. Because again, it's the sun and the moon which move in circles around the polar north above the earth, as stated in chapter 74 in the book of Enoch. But there's another story in Isaiah which talks about the sun going back 10 degrees on the sundial. And you can find it's in Isaiah chapter 38, verse 1 through 8. I'll just read one passage. Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz 10 degrees backward, so the sun returned 10 degrees by which degrees it was gone down. If you try to apply the sun going back 10 degrees on the sundial according to the heliocentric worldview, it would mean this. It would mean that the Most High would have had to stop the rotation of the earth, make it go back in the other direction, and then return back to its regular orbit and spinning. It doesn't make sense. All right, we'll be right back for final segment. I'm going to go into Enoch chapter 71, and I'm going to share with you a passage which was one of the main passages which I could not make sense of prior to embracing the flat earth as revelation. And it was this particular passage which enabled me to understand that the vision that Enoch is sharing and details within the book on the courses of the Heavenly Luminaries can only be understood when you apply his vision to the flat circle of the earth as stated by Isaiah and reference in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22, and the rest of that whole chapter. The specific passage that I'm referencing is from the Richard Lawrence translation. For those that have studied the book of Enoch, you know that the two translations which are best known are the Richard Lawrence translation and the R.H. Charles translation. And they vary slightly, each one of them slightly, and even the chapters vary slightly. So you have to go to the Richard Lawrence translation in order to line up the particular scripture that I'm going to be referencing here. It says this: the sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north to proceed towards the east is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. And so, as I stated prior, that when you try to make sense of this particular passage, you can't make sense of it applying it to the heliocentric worldview. Because how does the sun set in heaven and then returning by the north then come again to the east? Because if it's the earth spinning which causes the sun to set, to rise in the east and the set in the west, how is it ever going to go to the north and then return to the east? It can't. But when you understand that the circle of the earth, if as described by Enoch, that Enoch was taken up to possibly where Polaris is, since Polaris is the one star of the celestial night that remains fixed, and all of the other stars rotate in circle around it, that perhaps Enoch, being looking down at the North Pole and looking down at the circle of the earth from above, that we know that the sun and the moon, they both move in clockwise manner around the Arctic North. And so that is what is being described in this particular passage. And so once I understood that, then I began to research all of the scriptures found in the book on the courses of the Heavenly Luminaries, as if you were looking down on the circle of the earth, with the North Pole in the center and the Antarctic ice wall as the outer edge. And of course, the equator runs in the center between the Tropic of Cancer, which is the innermost circle closest to the Arctic regions, and the North Pole as the center of this bullseye or the circle of the earth, and that the Tropic of Capricorn is the larger circle and is the circle outside of the equatorial mean of this circle of the earth. And if you don't understand what I'm trying to project as image, all one has to do is look at the United Nations flag, and because the United Nations has emblazoned on its flag an emblem of an azimuthal equidistant projection map, which this map lays out the earth in this orientation, as I described in the poem that I opened this show with. And so when you are looking at the United Nations map and the circle of the earth laid out in such orientation, the description of the movement of the sun is described by Enoch as moving between these 6 gates of heaven. And the 6 gates of heaven are orientated in this manner. The first three gates, 1, 2, and 3, are located between the Tropic of Capricorn, which is the outermost circle, and the equator as the as the circle which divides the two tropics. Because even on the flat Earth map, the equator divides the two tropics. It's just not on the side of the globe, but it's the full circle of the Earth, which is divided in such manner. And so the next three gates of heaven, 4, 5, and 6, the fourth one is directly above the equator. The fifth one is above that. And the sixth one is above the fifth one and touches the Tropic of Cancer. And so if you looking down on this circle of the earth, the first gate is the one which is directly above the Tropic of Capricorn. The second gate is above that one. And then the third gate is the one that is above that one, which touches the equator. And then the fourth gate is above the equator, and the fifth one above that. And the sixth gate is the one that touches the Tropic of Cancer. And so the description, Enoch's description, he begins his description of the movement of the sun while it is orientated on the equator on the day of the vernal equinox. And the reason he does so is because when you become familiar with the ancient Hebrew calendar, spring, the God's calendar and the 12 lunar months of the year are referenced, and the solar months of the year begin on the day of the vernal equinox. That begins spring. And it's on this day that the sun is orientated directly above the equator. And then the next 30 days, it moves through the fourth gate. The next 30 days, it moves through the fifth gate. And then the next 30 days, it moves through the sixth gate. On the day of the summer solstice, it reverses course, and then reaching the Tropic of Cancer, reverses course and begins moving back in the other direction. And so there are 364 days in the calendar year according to the book of Enoch. The 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes, and then the 30 days that it takes to move through each one of these 6 gates of heaven. And so you take these 30 days times these 6 gates, and you get 180 days. You multiply that by 2 for the sun's movement back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and you get 360 days plus the 2 equinoxes and solstices. You get 364 days. And so, as I said, Enoch begins his movement, description of the sun's movement, with it positioned on the vernal equinox, on the vernal equinox between the third and the fourth gate. Takes 30 days to move through the fourth gate, 30 days to move through the fifth gate, 30 days to move through the sixth gate. Then on the summer solstice, it reaches the Tropic of Cancer, reverses course, and then it takes 30 days to move. And also on the summer solstice, that is the first day of summer. And then it reverses course. It takes 30 days to move through the sixth gate, to descend through the sixth gate, to descend through the fifth gate, and then to descend through the fourth gate, and then reaching the equator on the autumnal equinox, that begins fall. And then it takes 30 days to descend through the third gate, the 30 days to descend through the second gate, and 30 days to descend through the first gate. And then reaching the Tropic of Capricorn, it reverses course and begins to move up again through the first gate. And so the winter solstice begins the first day of winter, which, it varies between December 20th and December 23rd on the Gregorian calendar, because, that calendar is not fixed as the ancient Hebrew calendar is. And so on the winter solstice, it reverses course. It will take 30 days to move up through the first gate, and 30 days then to move up through the second gate, and then 30 days to move up through the third gate, and then reaching the equator for the vernal equinox, it begins a new year. And so it's the sun and the movement of the sun back and forth between these two tropics, the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, that Enoch describes for each one of the months of the year. And so I'll give you an example. I'm going to read from chapter 71 before we get to the end of the show. It says this in verse 10, 71 verse 10. It goes forth through the fourth of those 6 gates, which are at the rising of the sun. And in the fourth gate, through which the sun with the moon proceeds, in the first part of it, there are 12 open windows from which issues out a flame when they are open in their proper periods. When the sun rises in heaven, it goes forth through this fourth gate 30 days, and by the fourth gate in the west of heaven, on a level with it descends. During that period, the day is lengthened from the day, and the night curtailed from the night for 30 days. And then the day is longer by 2 parts than the night. I need to explain this as well. Enoch breaks down the division of night and day for each one of these 6 gates of heaven as being 18 parts equally. On the day of the vernal equinox, the day and the night have 9 equal parts. When you divide a 24-hour period by these 18 equal segments, each portion has an equivalent of being 1.333333 ongoing into infinity hours per day and hours per night. And so when Enoch references here that the day is precisely 10 parts and the night is 8, let me pull this up in my book, because I detail this in great detail also. All right. That when, like for instance, when the sun is in the first gate, Enoch details this 24-hour period as being 6 units for day and 12 units for night, because the night is, the longest night of the year and the shortest day of the year. It's on when it's in the first gate that this is when the winter solstice happens. And so when you multiply that, you get 7.999999 hours of day and 15.9999 hours for night. Let me go ahead and give you the breakdown for the hours when the sun moves through this fourth gate. He says there are 10 units for day and 8 units for night. This equals 13.33333 hours of day and 10.66666 hours for night. When the sun reaches the fifth gate, the day will be broken down as 11 units for day and 7 units for night. That breaks down into 14.66666 hours for day and 9.33333 hours for night. And so let me read just a little bit more of the book of Enoch so you can understand what he's referencing. And when you can make sense of what I'm telling you, you can reread the book of Enoch, his description of the motion of the sun between these 6 gates of heaven, and his description of the day becoming lengthened or the night becoming lengthened, and you'll understand exactly what he's talking about. All right. The next movement. The sun now returns to the east. As I said, it's moving in a circle above the earth, entering into the 6th gate and rising and setting in the 6th gate 31 days on account of its signs. At that period, the day is longer than the night, being twice as long as the night, and becomes 12 parts. But the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. Then the sun rises up that the day may be shortened and the night lengthened. So he's talking about the sun reversing course, because this is, again, the summer solstice. It's the longest day of the year. And after the sun reaches the Tropic of Cancer, it reverses course. That's why Enoch references it as this movement through the 6th gate as being 31 days. That's 30 days for the movement through the 6th gate, and then 1 day for the sun reaching the Tropic of Cancer to reverse course and begin to descend now through the 6 gates of heaven. And so continuing, verse 71:20. And the sun returns towards the east, entering into the 6th gate, where it rises and sets for 30 days. When that period is completed, the day becomes shortened precisely 1 part, so that it is 11 parts, while the night is 7 parts. Then the sun goes forth from the west, from that 6th gate, and proceeds eastwards, rising in the 5th gate for 30 days, and setting again westwards in the 5th gate of the west. At that period, the day becomes shortened 2 parts and is 10 parts, while the night is 8 parts. Then the sun goes from the 5th gate as it sets in the 5th gate of the west and rises in the 4th gate for 31 days, because it's about to reach the equator, on account of its signs and setting in the west. At that period, the day is made equal with the night, and being equal with it, the night becomes 9 parts and the day 9 parts. So you see how it corresponds exactly to what I just referenced. For those that don't understand, I'm going to post a link for a video that I made where I explained this in great detail. It's part of my flat earth playlist, and I'll give it to Kathy so she can share it with you in the chat room. But in this particular video, I show with pictures as well as with video exactly what Enoch is referencing and what he details in this book of the Heavenly Luminaries. And so if you watch this video, you'll understand what I was referencing. If you have any questions, send it to me. I will do another follow-up next Saturday where I cover some of this and explain some of the other aspects of the book of Enoch so that when you study it, you'll be able to understand it in a way that, as I said, this knowledge has been lost for 500 years. And it's only because I was able to apply my understanding of the flat earth to decrypting the book of Enoch that this knowledge has now been brought to light once again. And Enoch, in his vision that he was given by the angel Uriel, he verifies that, as we've been claiming, those of us that have been asking you and imploring you to research the flat earth as revelation, that indeed the earth is flat and a flat circular disc, and that the firmament was affixed to it, and that the sun and the moon were placed within the firmament above it, as the Bible asserts, as the book of Enoch asserts, as many even other extra biblical texts assert. And so those things confirm the veracity of the Bible as being a divinely inspired text, and also the book of Enoch as being a divinely inspired text. And the Bible codes also confirm this knowledge as revelation. And so, another thing that the Bible asserts is that out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses shall the truth be established. Well, those are your 3 witnesses: the Bible, the book of Enoch, and the Bible codes.
We are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
I am perceiving the creation with renewed conviction, deliberating over whether I'd been taught a misnomer of lies, the likes of which had me formerly entrenched in belief that we, as humanity, inhabit a spherical earth comparable to every globe sitting atop a teacher's desk. As inheritors of the grand matrix, we are indoctrinated into a preponderance of lies, speculative assumptions, carefully crafted as web of deceit. Awakening makes one question everything thought relevant, all that one had once so innocently accepted in assurance as evidentiary truth. Similar to the day after awakening to the conspiracy of 9/11 and government-sponsored terror, all must be reassessed upon this certainty that things are not as they appear to be. Have we all been held hostage to some secret societal Freemasonic accord, a deception so colossal, so pervasive, only those in the know understand our collective world situation? Do the globalist elite celebrate the achievement of earthly domination by hoisting flag in front and above the United Nations? depicting the flat earth as it really is, holding all nations in singular, circular embrace. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed, and I thank all of you that have taken the time to join me this evening. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be deliberating and talking about and delving into all things esoteric, especially in connection to the flat earth as topic. There's so much interest in it. And a lot of people say that, what does it matter? Why should people make it any kind of, give it any kind of priority for their lives? And why should they delve into it as topic? I mean, what does it matter? For Christians, a lot of people question whether it has any bearing on salvation. And is it really going to make a difference on a Christian's life? And then for those that are agnostic or that are just now coming to deliberate on whether there's any relevance to giving any kind of time to investigating this topic at all. Why? What does it matter? And in my opinion, whether the earth is flat or whether it's a sphere has grand significance in all of our lives, because the Darwinian heliocentric worldview has for hundreds of years led so many people astray, to the point where so many have accepted without any second thought that humanity has evolved of ape, and that there's some missing link, some ancestor out there which unites monkey and man. And that, especially for all these scientists, these PhD degree scientists that consider their professional opinions of more weight and bearing than that of the rest of humanity, and that have accepted all of the scientific belief systems which cater to the Darwinian and the heliocentric model as far as world, and these accepted theorems. They have no belief in God, and they have been led astray to such degree that they have no real deep and profound spirituality to their lives other than science as their religion. They don't believe in intelligent design. They don't believe in a creator other than, the protons, neutrons, and electrons that somehow just randomly came together to create us, and also that made the earth what it is, just because they believe that it's just another one of those planets that just happens to orbit around the sun and happens to be at the right distance to be in the Goldilocks zone, and that this is the reason why it is all a grand deception. And that when you really begin to look into the flat earth and come to understanding about how even biblically and prophetically and through the gospel that the truth has been established and written down thousands of years in advance to this grand deception, then you have to really come to terms with there being a creator and that we were made in the image of the creator and that the earth is a special place and that we as humanity share special covenant with this entity, the grand arbiter that created all of us in his image. And when you ponder these things and are forced to acknowledge and reckon this as evidentiary truth, well, it completely destroys the scientific established so-called truth that the world has bought into for hundreds of years. And so tonight we're going to talk about another one of those books that thousands of years in advance locked the flat earth as revelation into its scriptural text, the book of Enoch. And I'm going to share with you this evening how it was that once I began to study the flat earth and then once I opened myself to its grand possibility, how having read and studied the book of Enoch when I was 18 years old, there was a portion of the text called the Book on the Courses of the Heavenly Luminaries, which I never could make sense of. And studying it, looking into it, I was never able to understand it in the way that I felt like eons and epochs of time preceding ours, that these are the beings, these entities arrived here long ago, and that either they mated directly in some kind of bestial experiment or engaging directly in some kind of unholy fornication, that the result, or whether it was some DNA genetic experiment, that involvement, that manipulation is what led to and brought about who we are and who we have come to be. And the Bible establishes and warns about this strong delusion and references who these so-called ancient aliens are as the fallen watchers and also the rebel angels that were cast out of the heavens long ago. It's not that they came from some far away place and ended up being here after, traveling or utilizing wormhole and technologies to access this particular plane and this particular planet, even though we know it's not a planet. But they believe that it's just one of, even 9 here in this solar system. And so the truth of the word, the gospel, it brings clarity to the lies that have been built upon the lies that so many of the world have accepted as truth, and having accepted as truth, have now found themselves so lost and so led astray that everybody is willing and ready to bow before the Antichrist, and that these ancient aliens are going to be established as the creators of all of us. And so that's why it's, in my opinion, very important to study the flat earth as revelation and come to know the things that are in connection to it, because when you can grasp it and make sense of it and understand that the whole heliocentric worldview cannot in any way be verified scientifically or through theory, that life evolved here on this particular planet. And so they also believe that there are millions, billions even, other Earths out there which have all in similarity evolved life, and that there are other Earthlings, other people that also evolved of monkeys or evolved of other creatures that have sentience and that have consciousness and that are far in advance even of our own capacities, our own abilities, that are possibly millions and billions of light years in advancement of our own technologies. And they believe that many of these beings have traveled great distance to arrive here to this planet, and that they, in fact, somehow long ago, these ancient aliens or astronauts, humanity from the future even, that they seeded humanity here on this planet. And so that whole belief system, all of those lies built upon other lies, these preponderance of lies and this web of deceit, has the whole world now ripe and ready to bow down to these Anunnaki gods, just as being pushed and seeded into the consciousness, into the minds of humanity now worldwide. Everybody is so willing to believe that the ancient aliens created us, and that the whole reason we are not able to find this so-called missing link is because it wasn't some ape ancestor out there that bridged that gap from gorilla or chimpanzee or whatever monkey it is that we supposedly evolved from. It was the ancient aliens. It was these alien beings that came from however far away and whichever planetary body which is similar to ours, that were far